Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Crypto Entrepreneurs Podcast with your host, Charles. Enjoy.
Today we've got a good one for you, but before we get into it, just a quick word from our sponsors, Dudex. So Dudex is a new cryptocurrency derivatives trading platform that aims to provide a fair and professional experience for its users. With third-party market makers and no exchange token or internal trading desks, Dudex creates transparency and puts the customers first. A couple of the features on Dudex include 100x leverage trading, perpetual swaps without expiry date and daily settlement, 100,000 TPS per contract, and most importantly, no KYC. That's right, every crypto trader's favorite words, no KYC. Sign up with the link in the description below to start trading today and receive up to $100 in free Bitcoin when you make your first deposit. Happy trading, guys. All right, now let's get to the episode. Today's a special episode. It's episode 50 of the Crypto Entrepreneurs Podcast, which is pretty crazy to me. I really didn't think I'd make it here when I first started this. I almost gave up at one point, but here we are, episode 50, just chugging along. Guests are getting better, quality's getting better. I'm really excited where things are headed. And today we've got a great one for you. I've got another member of that trading group PDF. You've probably heard me talking about them on Twitter. And today we've got Coinpocalypse. He specializes in algorithmic trading. And he also has a site called Algo where you can get access to some of the algorithms that he's created and use them to trade. And then there's a bunch of other people who also contribute to the site as well. So let's jump into it. So Coinpocalypse, I just want to say thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I've been trying to get, most of the PDF guys on. I've got a couple more scheduled. I think Bit Dealer and Cuban have also agreed to come on. So I just really want to thank you for coming on.
Now, my pleasure, man.
I really appreciate it. And before we really get into things and get into your trading style and what I really want to talk about, do you think you could just give us a rundown on who you are, what you were doing before you found cryptocurrencies? And then if you can, because I know some traders, they just trade, but are you solely a trader or are you an investor as well?
Okay, yeah. Well, I used to be in IT. I did sales and consultancy for cloud companies. And before that, I actually sold copiers. The big office ones. But I never really grounded there. Always a lot of friction with management and board. And eventually I started my own business in IT project management, which was in 2017. And around that time, I also got into contact with crypto. I already heard about Bitcoin, several times, but had this idea that I was already too late. Me and a bunch of friends, we actually just bought some alts. We had no idea what we were doing. Just reading on Twitter what everybody was buying. And at the end of the year, everybody struck it big, and most of us held down to the bottom. So that really changed my perspective on trading and investing, because what I actually was doing, we were just gambling. Even if you go back to my account on TradingView, you'll see some ideas I posted on around May 2018. I was still busy doing Ichimoku, thinking that was the way to go. But I think everybody has had these times that they don't know what they're doing. They're trying to find a way that works for them. And crypto Twitter itself is pretty much horrible for everybody who starts trading.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess, to be honest with you. There's just, every single different opinion possible, most of them wrong.
And all very sure of themselves.
Oh, extremely. Everyone's got a 90 to 100% strike rate, and they're always right, and everyone else is always wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
But okay.
So I actually was in a crypto rants paid group in
Oh man.
January of 2018.
Oh God.
It was a horrible month.
Honestly, I appreciate that you are willing to own your mistakes, and you talk
Oh
about
yeah, sure.
holding alts down, being in Rand's group. This is stuff that's laughable now, and I think most people wouldn't admit that kind of stuff. But you're here, you're talking about it, you're saying, yes, I made those
Mhm.
mistakes, and I've moved on.
Uh,
Um,
I,
so I
I I
really
think that I really think there's only maybe a few traders that did everything right from the get-go. But you have to make your own mistakes, just like just like life. And it's important to come to a level where you understand that you really have to do it yourself.
completely agree. And yeah, there are those outliers, of course, but I think for
Mhm.
most, there's, you know, it's a pretty steep learning curve, and you really have to get in there, get your hands dirty, make mistakes, and eventually you can learn from those mistakes.
Mhm.
But okay, so I appreciate you kind of giving us the rundown of your background. You talked about sales, and then you said, nah, that's not for me. I'm going to start my own business, which I very much appreciate. This show is called the Crypto Entrepreneurs
Yeah.
Podcast. I love talking with different entrepreneurs. And then you talked about your kind of transition into trading. First, it was just buying coins, holding them,
Mhm.
using, just terrible trading techniques. And over the course of time, you've kind of developed your own trading strategy. Before we kind of get into that, do you still hold any Bitcoin for the long term? Are you a long term investor in Bitcoin?
Um, if I'm holding anything, it's Bitcoin.
Okay, there we go.
There, yeah, there's only one bag of alts I'm still holding because it's underwater, and I think it's gonna pump sometime. That's NISO. I bought that on kind of an impulse. I still have some bad habits that are hard to kick, but that's the only one.
Yeah, we had a lot of the boys on Twitter shilling Nizo, so I can see why you kind of fell into that. Um, but okay, yeah, the reason I ask is because there are some traders who think that Bitcoin's a terrible long-term investment. They have no,
Mhm.
need or want to hold it long term, and they just
Well,
trade it for the volatility. So, just wanted to kind of
yeah.
get your.
Well, I have maybe a little bit different perspective on it because I met through Twitter as well, but I met DollarFire this year talking about algos with his service, the Trade Tosser, which now runs through Alpha Algo. And I'm also in the Slack with those guys. They trade options. They're on a completely different level. They do macro trading. Um, that's the stuff that I see coming by there is really next level. So different from what I do. But yeah, they see a lot of risks with the current target two system in Europe. The quantitative easing. What is your fiat going to be worth? They're not convinced in Bitcoin neither, but it's enough for me to at least keep exposure to it because I think it's long term. Now, it's still a bet, but maybe a pretty good one.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Like there are, definitely flaws that I see, but and it all could fall to shit in my opinion, but I think just with the general landscape and the global economy and where things are at, and even local economies that we've seen that have started to collapse, I think it would be foolish not to at least have a little bit of exposure to it.
Yeah, don't put your life savings in it, but maybe a little bit.
Ah, there we go. I'm glad I've finally got more rational people on this show. The last episode I put out was with, I don't know if you know the quote unquote Vile Gang, but that episode was all just on, rational investing and not being over emotional. So it's
Hmm.
a breath of fresh air to have you on kind of saying the same stuff. Um,
Yeah, I also think if all your money is tied up in one thing, you can't help but become emotional. You start to sleep rotten. I think it's just a bad influence on other aspects in your life.
Yeah, completely agree. So you briefly brought it up. You talked about your trading strategy. So just moving on from kind of what you were doing before crypto and your current thoughts on the market, can you just give us a rundown of, everything that you've got going on? Can you talk about some of the indicators that you've put out and some of the articles that you've put out? And then can you give us a rundown of Alpha Algo as well? Because you've got, a couple different things going on. So I just want to let my
Yeah.
audience get a full perspective.
All right. Yeah. So I started writing a couple of articles on Medium, which was more about self-reflection, because I was learning a lot of stuff at the time about algo trading, about creating indicators, about coding, and I thought it would really help me if I would just write some articles, put it out there, see what kind of feedback I would get, and introduce myself a little bit on crypto Twitter as well, to get into contact with these other traders. Um, I got some really good feedback. People liked the way I wrote. I got a lot of messages from people who used one of the articles, which is more like a walkthrough on how to create your own moving averages bot. Yeah, it was really fun in general, and I wish I had some more time to pick that up again, because I still have some ideas about different time frames, how you combine those. So a lot of good stuff, I think. And then yeah, I also wrote a couple of public scripts, so people
Sorry,
could use them.
before we get into the scripts, can you just give us, the title of some of those, just so,
Oh
we
yeah,
can.
sure. So I have one which is like an introduction into algo scripting, which talks about one indicator in specific, which is ADX, which is a volatility indicator, which one I really like. Shows strong trends in the strength of price movement, which can be a good factor in one of your algos to decide to keep a position open or to close it. So that can be a trigger for something. Yeah, I absolutely love that one. I also have one on data selection. Specifically, all the articles are specifically about TradingView, but TradingView has some issues with backtesting, and especially when it uses future data to determine current positions, which is kind of like cheating. So you get an equity curve which is insane, but doesn't reflect reality at all. Yeah, so I had to check which the other one is called, that's the walkthrough one,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
just it just shows in like I think 14 steps or something how to create your own bot, which is like 14 lines of code. It's really simple. So yeah, that's what I do on the Medium articles. And besides that, I wrote a couple of indicators that combined a couple of them, because most of the traders on crypto Twitter are on the free plans and they can only add like 2 or 3. So it was quite handy to combine a couple of them, and they still get used pretty much. Um, so that was more like an exercise, because when you're coding, it's very important to keep practicing, keep writing new stuff. Get your hands dirty, as they say. Um, and when I got better at writing these algos, I started using them live, but I still had a problem that you have to sleep, uh, and I needed something to babysit my positions when I was sleeping. So I started looking into Python, um, and I think I spent like 2.5 months, day in day out, just coding in Python, just writing all sorts of little scripts. One for scanning an email for an alert, one for making screenshots, one for making or putting out alerts to a Discord server or to Twitter or Telegram. So I had that, all these little scripts set up, and I opened a Telegram channel to put out all my bot alerts for free. Oh, and I got a little bit of traction, and I picked up a lot more techniques. I made it more stable. Started opening it up to a couple of friends to test it. Started opening it up to more people, upgrading the infrastructure. On and on and on. And now it's quite a platform that it's really robust. Um, and today we're almost at 750 users. So that's taken quite a flight.
Yeah, man. It sounds like you have so much going on. I don't know how you find time to keep up with all of it. But I cruised through a
Yeah, well,
couple. I cruised through a couple of the Medium articles. I really appreciate you just giving us, a couple of the titles so people have an idea of what kind of stuff you're putting out. And then you have your
mhm.
indicators, and then Alpha Algos, probably the biggest one. And that
Yeah,
user base
definitely
is
by far.
growing. So kind of moving on from what you're doing, I kind of want to, focus on algorithmic trading. That's what I wanted the focus of this episode to be on.
Hmm.
So you mentioned one of the indicators that you use pretty often, but can you go into a couple other indicators that you use? Can you also
Hmm.
talk about just,
Uh,
what algorithmic trading is for some of my users or some of my listeners who don't really know what it is? And then
mhm.
lastly, for people who have been writing scripts, can you talk about, how you start writing a new one? Like, where do you start? How do you find that inspiration? What are some methods that you use? That kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So I'll start with what is algo trading? It's using or creating a specific set of rules you can replicate at any time, which is always watching the data and will execute based on those rules. No matter what. And I think that that comes to a important part of what is technical analysis. A lot of people think that TA works. Well, I have a different opinion on it. TA is a tool uh, to backtest your strategies. If you have a set of rules like I want price to be above the 50 moving average. I want, if you're working with RSI, I want that to be above 70, so it gets into the overbought zone. You can have all these little rules that you can easily put into a script, and then you can just have an alert go off when all those conditions are met. But you can also backtest it, through the years. You don't have to go with a pen through every graph to mark off when it was at that when those rules apply to the market conditions. So it's the piece what algo trading mostly is actually the backtesting, um, and backtesting on itself is a skill which has many facets. Because I think most people just use the backtester in TradingView, but you have different methods of backtesting, like the walk forward, which might be a bit difficult to explain in a podcast, but it is using out of sample date. Sorry, I mean you use the date within a sample. So let's say you take the months January, February, and March, and you test your strategy on that. So there should be a couple of parameters, a couple of settings that roll out of those tests, and then you use those tests on the month of April, but without having tested on April. And if your results are still good in April, you probably got some alpha. Um, let's see. What was your other questions about trading again?
Yeah, yeah. So when writing up these scripts, you talked about under certain conditions, uh, you can either set it to buy or sell when X, Y, and Z happens. So can you talk about some
Yeah.
of the conditions or the indicators that you use most often when writing your own scripts?
You don't want to give away too much, but I think
Yeah,
a very good.
just a couple. I know
Uh, all
it's
right.
hard.
I'll talk about some of the higher time frame scripts, because the low time frame scripts, that's those are very hard. There's a lot of noise, and you have to find a way to get around that, or else your bot will be buying every minute, and your account will be drained by trading fees. But if you go to the higher time frames, I think one of the best things you can do in these cryptocurrency markets is they trend a lot more than the FX markets. So you're not that bad off with using MAs. So you can use those MAs. Is price above? Is it below? You can even use Ichimoku, which is a trend system, which has a couple of rules on its own. Is price above the cloud, below the cloud? Where's the Tenkan? Where's the cross? I'm not saying I use these myself, but it's a good way to get started into algo scripting by using these because they're relatively simple. And if you go into very complicated indicators, there's a book I'm a real fan of. It's called Rocket Science for Traders, which is by John Ehler. And he writes, or he used to work at NASA, I think, and he translated some of the concepts they worked on there into algorithmic trading. So he has like this filter for digital signal processing, which is very hard to understand. And that's one of the beautiful things about TradingView is you can use those formulas and you can see live on your screen what they do. So that's a real advantage. PineScript is really great for prototyping, I think. But if you want to get serious, you'll have to master a language like Python or Node.
Obviously on this podcast, I try to get people on to talk about their secret sauce for success. And as a trader, you definitely don't want to be giving that away. But you did talk about, on a higher time frames, crypto, unlike Forex, tends to trend pretty hard. So you talked about some simple stuff like, just moving averages. And that's kind of how you can get your feet wet in a sense on working on putting together these scripts. So for someone who's a little bit more advanced like yourself, say you're working on, developing a new script, where do you start? Say you're trying to develop a new strategy. I just feel like there's so many different ways that it can go. What do you specifically do to start working on a new strategy?
Yeah, it was funny. I was listening to your last episode with Quant Fiction, and he was talking about data analysis, looking for inefficiency in the data, which is a completely different approach than my own. I actually tend to combine a couple of indicators, or two or three, or I even did some more, but it can get quite messy. And I make an overlay with the chart, and I mark off parts where the price starts to move, and then I try to find some evidence for that within the indicators. See if they match, see if they can give a signal that, or if both of them can give the right signal. And it's very hard to find those, but I have found quite a couple of them. And in certain market conditions, they work very well. So I have a couple of bots which I switch around depending on what the market is doing.
Perfect. Yeah. So I mean, you said your approach is pretty different to quants, but I think at the end of the day, it is this trial and error, kind of going through, combining different indicators, overlaying it on the chart, seeing if you've got something, pretty much.
Yeah, and not always indicators, but you have to try and find something in the price, try and find some evidence of what's happening. If it's too random, you can't replicate it. So you have to really work so much with these charts, so much with this data, that you can also, understand when something is worth noticing and when something is worth discarding.
Completely agree. And, for everyone listening, there are thousands of people out there doing this every single day. So it's not something that's just going to happen. It's not going to just fall into your lap. There's a lot of work involved here, and a lot of trial and effort. So I appreciate you. Yeah.
I spent like, I think from maybe November last year till July this year, I spent 7 days a week working, trying to get better, trying to find more edges, working on the platform. Maybe I went to a birthday once in a while, but that's it. We're long days, but if you really want to create some success, you really have to go for it.
Completely agree. Whether that's trading or just building a business,
Yeah,
or doing anything really, you're gonna have to put in that effort. And I it's I see a lot of people who trade part time, and it's more of a hobby. And I think this probably isn't something you should have as a hobby. This is full time work. This is something you need to be dedicated to. Your
oh
money's
yeah,
on the
definitely.
line. So I just want my audience to understand that yeah, you can make it a hobby, but if you're trying to
Yeah,
make it
yeah.
your income, it's a lot of work.
Trading is hard. It's and it doesn't come easy.
No, completely agree. Um, so I thank you for kind of giving us your secret sauce. I know you kept a lot of stuff under wraps just because you can't be giving away your alpha. But let's move on. I like to ask all of my guests this. What are you most excited for in the coming 12 months? What's in your pipeline?
Well, right now I'm really busy learning options, which is something because I've been working with in that Slack with DollarFire and seeing those guys trade. It's just so interesting to me. I really want to get a hang of that. So I'm following their course, which is really excellent. And you get into contact with terms, and they give strategies, and it's there's so much alpha in it. It's like being in a candy store. It's just so much fun to be learning that. So I'm very busy with that, and I want to start running an option portfolio next year.
There we go. So
Uh, the,
quick question, because you said you got
yeah,
into crypto sort of investing at first and then trading after that.
yeah.
Was trading cryptocurrencies your first market, or did you have any exposure to traditional markets before that?
No, crypto is my only market. I am looking at FX, but it's mostly paper trading.
There we go. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to kind of get a general sense of, your experience with different types of markets. Um, Anything
Yeah,
else you
no,
got in the pipeline?
well, oh yeah, sure, for sure.
Sorry to cut you off there if you were trying to say something.
I have some exposure to FX, but it's also through a bot. So and it's not my bot, so that just trades for me, which is also on Alpha Algo. Um, so I want to get more into options. I want to go deeper into data science. Um, I want to read some books on that because I haven't had much time to read, books this year. More like articles, a lot of YouTube videos on coding, which really helped. Um, Trading with the PDF guys, which has been a lot of fun and really interesting to see all their different styles, how they look at the market, how many trades some of them take, how few trades some of them take, and that's been really eye-opening to incorporate some of those techniques into my own trading. Um, but yeah, mostly expanding functionality for Alpha Algo, which I think is really important because I do have a real sense of responsibility for all those people using those algos. It's their money on the line, so the systems have to be working properly, um, and yeah, they have to have the best experience possible. So I still have a lot of work in that, um, and yeah, just adding more algos. And a couple of more exchanges.
All right, man. Just like what you've got going on now, it sounds like you've got a lot going on in the future. Um,
Mm.
Getting into options will be a lot of fun. I guarantee that. You mentioned, learning more about data science, and I just had Quant on, so you two, you're both in
Yeah,
PDF. I'm sure
definitely.
you guys are talking pretty often.
Yeah.
and then of course growing the business, growing
Yeah.
Alpha Algo. So I appreciate kind of you giving us your next 12 months and what we plan to see from you, or what we can hope to see from you. Now I just wanted to wrap things up with one last question, and it's a two-part question. What's the biggest misconception surrounding algorithmic trading? And then second part, which you can answer after, is where can people start? If they want to get into creating their own algos, they know nothing. What are some resources that we can throw at them that they can go check out?
Yeah. Okay, so what's the biggest misconception? I think that the misconception about algo trading is that it's supposed to be better than manual trading, which isn't necessarily true. I think of algo trading as a different strategy besides manual trading, just as holding something for long term, uh, doing some leverage trading with a smaller part of your portfolio. Just diversifying in those strategies doesn't reduce your exposure to the market, but I think putting all your money on one horse is actually riskier. Um, algo trade of the algo trading is probably better at executing the same sort of predefined setups time after time, and you don't have to be around for it. Which really can lift some of the mental stress that comes with trading. Um, and for people that want to start with trading, I think
So
it's
wait,
actually very hard.
hold on.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off there. But before we go into that second part of the question, I see a lot of people shilling their bots on Twitter and making these grand claims that, oh, my bot makes 70% a month or something like that, and it's
Yeah.
consistent. You're guaranteed to make money. And I know that's bullshit. I know that's bullshit for the most part. I mean, like, there are the outliers, and sometimes someone will have an insanely good month. But I just want my audience to understand that if you're seeing that kind of stuff on Twitter, or being, you're seeing it in advertisements, take it with a grain of salt. Understand that if it's too good to be true, or if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
I've just seen and heard too many people falling prey to these trading bots that people are trying to sell them, that aren't
Mhm.
profitable, and they're making these insane claims that they are, extremely profitable month after month after month, and that's just not what it is at all.
No, algo trading isn't necessarily profitable month on month. Some of my algos have had a bad month, but especially when you look long term, they do stack up. They manage risk better in a way because they're not emotionally involved. So yeah, if you have a good strategy, just go for the long run. Don't up your leverage to 50 or 100, because you're gonna get blown out. Keep it easy, keep it steady, keep it low stress. Um,
Exactly. And then, I
but
mean, so Quan also talked about, the fact that there is alpha decay, and that eventually,
yeah,
for the most part, bots will start to, or, your algorithms will start to become less
yeah,
profitable.
yeah, yeah. You have to keep an eye on the metrics. See if what is also very important when developing these bots is not only making the rules, but really understanding why they will execute at a certain point. And if you understand that, but you see like a divergence in the results that you were expecting, um, especially with other tests you did before, then you've got a piece of decay, and you have to intervene. So you have to think about, okay, so how I'm going to solve that part. So yeah, it's a continuous game of getting that engine better, getting more horsepower out of it, or starting from scratch when it doesn't work anymore, and think of something else.
Exactly. And then on to that second question. You did talk about Rocket Science for Traders. That was a great book to pick up and read. Are there any other resources you have for someone who wants to break into this?
I think the resources for algo trading are abundant, but also very flawed. there is a subreddit called algo trading, which is full of physics students with machine learning, artificial intelligence bots, you name it. And it's 99%, pure trash. You just have to wade through the enormous and vast amounts of shit to find something that you can relate to, something that you can make work for yourself, something that you're willing to put the time in to investigate. But you're not going to find the golden egg somewhere. You really have to create that for yourself.
There we go. I mean, are there any places that you found to be particularly helpful, or any, books or articles that really stood out?
No, for me it was mostly. I actually went through the when you go to the Pine editor in TradingView, you can get a list there of all the standard indicators, from A to Z. I went through every single one of them, look at the code, see what makes it work, actually understand it, reproduce it, combine it with other stuff. And if you run into an article, pick it up, read it. But and people definitely shouldn't forget. I think I mentioned this earlier, but actually look into backtesting. It's a separate skill besides writing those scripts. Really understand backtesting, how that works. Those two go hand in hand.
Perfect. There we go. So yeah, you talked about, working 7 days a week. This is what you were kind of working on, was going through and doing your own research. That's a pretty common phrase in the industry.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. And then most people I've talked to have said, pick up Python first. You said that was what you picked up originally.
Yeah.
So just anyone listening.
The thing with Python is because it's so widely used.
Exactly.
When you're stuck with an issue, and you eventually everybody ends up on Stack Overflow, which is like the help desk for programmers that don't know what they're doing. You can find every answer that everybody has run into. Now, if it's for finding how many decimals are behind how many decimals there are in a number, why your screenshot module isn't working. There's so many stuff that everybody has run into once or twice before. It's a really interesting way to see how other people solve it, and I think that only makes you a better coder in the end.
All right, man. I really appreciate it. You've gone through a lot. You've talked about past, present, what you've got planned for the future. You talked about algorithmic trading and how you can get it, kind of your feet wet with it, and then how you kind of develop new strategies yourself. So, again, I thank you. Is there anything else before we go that you want my audience to know?
Maybe one more thing about the indicators. There are categories of indicators. You have leading indicators and you have lagging indicators. So RSI is supposed to be a leading one, and MAs are a lagging one, because they're the average price of the 50 days before it, so it's lagging. And some people combine leading and lagging indicators with each other. Well, I suggest you really think about why that would be good. So if you have a leading indicator on one hand, which is supposed to tell you what's going to happen, and you have a lagging indicator on the other side, what would a mix of those two really? What would be the result of that? Is that something you can rely on? I don't think so.
Perfect. Thank you again for all the information. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I'm going to snag a couple more of you PDF guys, and soon enough we're going to have all of you on here giving away all of your alpha.
Yeah, we call you our resident priest.
Yeah, I'm always talking you guys up on Twitter. So again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, guys, that wraps up another episode of the Crypto Entrepreneurs Podcast. I just want to say thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. The show's for you guys. I make it for you guys. And it wouldn't happen without you guys. So I really do want to thank you for that. And if you found anything in this episode helpful, or any of the previous episodes that I've put out, can you just do me a huge favor and leave us a review? It would really help us out. And then on top of that, could you also share it with any friends, family, anyone on social media? If there's something that spoke to you in any of these episodes, I would really appreciate it if you could do that for us. So thanks again for listening, and hope to see you next episode.